China is by far the leading processor and refiner of rare earth metals. That's seen as a strategic threat. A US-led international partnership has emerged to challenge that dominance. What will the new order look like, and how can Canada be a winner here? Let's dig deeper with Ian Mitchell, head of mining at Gowling WLG. Great to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Do you think this really will translate into building of factories and refineries on the ground to challenge China, or is there just a lot of talk and statements of intent?
I'm actually cautiously optimistic at the end of 2025. I think I might have had a different response at the beginning of the year, I think, when we talked. I think the developments this year with sort of the G7 Critical Mineral Action Plan coming into play in the summer this year over June, and then the announcements yesterday from the provincial and federal government on the one project, one process sort of collaboration to reduce the barriers. I think those two things combined sort of give us some hope, give me some hope at least, that the talk is sort of moving into a framework now that will actually allow us to implement some of this.
I know this is a very broad question, but I've heard it said that the Chinese have built up such a lead in expertise that unless we start poaching their experts, maybe we'll resort to that. It's going to be very hard to catch up.
Agreed. There's sort of the resource and the capital required to sort of build the refineries and the projects, but the human capital is something sort of people tend to forget. I was talking to one of the lithium experts from Chile. It was a year ago. And that was his biggest suggestion was you need to find the people, you need to find them where they are, and you need to get there now because there aren't that many of them. And so I think, that's going to be a big component of things as they move forward. And we're going to have to figure out whether we're poaching those people from China or if there are enough people between sort of the rest of the developed world to figure that out. But I agree, it's going to be a challenge.
Kind of reminds me, remember the Venetians had a monopoly on glass blowing and they were desperate. I think they'd murder you if you tried to smuggle the secret out. You're in the camp that says really Canada's standing in its own way with the endless regulatory challenges and legal cases that hold up developments.
Yes, that's sort of where I was, I think, at the beginning of the year. As I said, I'm more optimistic now with the announcement yesterday from sort of the feds and the Ontario government, where they're finding ways to cooperate to reduce that regulatory burden and time frame. And so I think that was one of the biggest hurdles, and we sort of hadn't really seen anything concrete. And as of yesterday, we're sort of seeing something concrete. I think the challenge is going to be actually seeing this implemented in 2026 and seeing that regulatory burden and time frame decrease. Again, we're not looking to decrease the requirements to build these projects. We still need them to, sort of to meet very strict requirements. But what we don't need is overlap between the feds, the province, to just extend that time frame out. So it looks like there's a plan in Ontario with the feds right now, and I'm hopeful that that will help to see those project timelines come down, which means costs come down and certainty starts to go up.
As you know, Bill C-5 gives the cabinet, or really the Prime Minister's office, powers to override a lot of laws to get things moving. I presume eventually, if they're serious, it'll come down to brass tacks, and they will have to say, nope, we're just not going to examine that project anymore.
Yeah, well, right now, projects could get examined sort of both federally and provincially, and so it could sort of double up on timeframes. This is a first step to try and minimize that. I don't know that we'll get to we're just going to ignore sort of any material issues, and that's not really what I think anyone wants. We want to make sure that the checks have been done on the environmental, that there's Indigenous consultation, that we sort of hit all of the sort of markers that we need to check it. I think what we're trying to avoid here is duplication and running things concurrently so that we can minimize that time frame and try and get it in sort of under a decade. Ideally, if we can do better than that, that would be great. But even getting it down sort of into the 6-7 year mark would be a huge improvement from where we are now.
And why is it so easy to block these projects? Is it just common law has grown up over the years?
And it's not necessarily that projects, sort of are always blocked, right? There's huge capital requirements. So one, you have to get the certainty to get the capital in, and sometimes projects don't even get far enough down the road for that to happen.
Yes.
Two, there are frequently sort of environmental components. There could be First Nations components. By and large, I find they get worked through, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of capital. And so over the years, capital has moved to other jurisdictions where the requirements have been lower. So, it's not necessarily that I don't think we will get through them. I think that it's just in the last decade, people have been spending that capital in other jurisdictions where those thresholds have been lower, and so there's been less resistance.
The major projects office, it has drawn some criticism because some commentators are wondering, well, why would you just be favoring a few projects like this? Shouldn't it be across the board?
Yeah, well, the reality, I think, is we live in a world of limited resources, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the government is trying to figure out what they can do to advance projects that they think meet sort of the goals, price, demand, that where there's a demand that they can aggregate with others, where there's standards, where they think they can get it through. It's just not feasible for them to sort of, 58% of the companies on the TSXV, I think, for example, are mining companies. It's not feasible for them to sort of just say, we're going to lift all boats here. Mm-hmm. I think we have to be strategic. And again, we're looking in, especially this is all in the critical minerals, right? And so we don't need 15 rare earth projects to help rectify that imbalance you talked about at the beginning, right? And so I think it's really looking at the commodity, figuring out what we need, which projects have the most likelihood of succeeding, and then we're going to have to pick projects to back. And that's just sort of the reality of limited resources.
And the federal government has actually provided a date here, haven't they? They've said that they're committed to ending environmental examination of projects in Ontario's Ring of Fire by the end of 2026.
Well, I think I haven't read the entire agreement in detail yet, but the way I read it was that for the roads, there's sort of a subset there with respect to some roads into the Ring of Fire, and they've agreed to commit that they will complete their process by no later than I believe it's June 2026.
Yes.
To line up with the provinces. So that's a very specific one, but yeah, they've committed to get that done in the same timeline as it would otherwise be done sort of on the provincial side to try and move that forward on the timeline the province was looking to do.
Yes, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, it's the Impact Assessment Agency. They say we'll have done our work on the roads by the end of June 2026.
Yeah, I don't think it was everything.
No, it wasn't everything. No, I was being a bit pie in the sky there. Yeah, but I mean, for civil servants to actually give you a date, that's interesting. Yeah, because they do like to leave things vague. Thanks very much, Ian. Great talking to you.
Not a problem.
Ian Mitchell, head of mining at Gowling WLG.